Well, the Gillard government says it's gradually closing the gap in some key areas of Indigenous disadvantage. But today, a key plank in its strategy, proposed legislation to extend the Northern Territory intervention, came under fire from two of Australia's most senior jurists. Hamish Fitzsimmons reports.
The annual Closing the Gap update on Indigenous disadvantage shows infant mortality rates, literacy, numeracy and early childcare education have improved, but school retention, employment and life expectancy rates remain poor.
Foundations are in place, work is underway. We can measure encouraging improvement right now.
We are moving towards halving the gap in so many of these areas. But a gap which has been halved is not a gap which has been closed.
In 2007, the Northern Territory National Emergency Response was enacted by the Howard government in a radical reaction to what it saw was a crisis in Aboriginal welfare, education and health. The Labor government accepts elements of the intervention helped close the gap in the Territory, but its plan to extend it in a modified form for 10 years, called the Stronger Futures Policy, is being attacked by two of the nation's most senior legal figures.
It does contain an element of racism about it, in the sense that it assumes that they can't really contribute substantially to the development of policies and the implementation of policies for their improvement.
I think they're thoroughly questionable. In fact, I think they're bad laws.
If the Stronger Futures laws are passed, parents whose children repeatedly miss school will have welfare payments cut. The former Chief Justice of the Family Court, Alastair Nicholson, says the laws are poorly thought out.
They're top-down laws that impose effectively government, quote, white solutions on Aboriginal communities without their involvement or approval.
Frank Vincent is a former Victorian Supreme and Appeals Court judge. He believes the laws echo the paternalistic approach to Aboriginal welfare of yesteryear.
The notion behind them is very much the notion that always seems to permeate our approach to Aboriginal people. We believe that we have the solution to the kinds of problems with which they're confronted.
The judges were launching a report in which Aboriginal people the federal government claims to have consulted about Stronger Futures reject much of the process. In a statement, the Federal Indigenous Affairs Minister, Jenny Macklin, says there were consultations with Aboriginal people at 100 meetings. But it's the extent of them that's being questioned.
At best, it appears to have been superficial and certainly not extended beyond the point of gaining broad approval for what might be described as motherhood statements.
Indigenous leaders are concerned elements of Stronger Futures could exacerbate the already high jail rate of Aboriginal people. For example, getting caught with 1.5 litres of any alcohol, including beer, in a restricted area will mean a mandatory 18-month jail term.
I don't have problems with, if you talk about it in drug terms, suppliers of alcohol, grog runners and all. I don't have a problem with taking action against them, but I have a problem with criminalising something that every Australian takes for granted, that they can have a beer, they can have a drink.
The federal government insists the laws comply with the Racial Discrimination Act because they cover the entire community.
You just can't get over the Racial Discrimination Act by passing a discriminatory law and say, oh, yes, that applies to everyone in areas that we designate, if the real purpose is to control the Aboriginal people. And that's, to me, it's almost undeniable that that's what was intended.
The legislation will be debated in the lower house this week. Hamish Fitzsimmons, Late Line.